degree evening out there. I can handle more of this kind of winter. If you would, please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for invocation by Councilmember Frank Ewell. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the beautiful day and all the blessings that surround us. Blessings that we often take for granted. Give peace to those who are ailing, both mentally and physically. Help them to better times. Bestow your blessings on this group tonight and help us make wise decisions. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Our clerk tonight is Tony Keener. Tony, if you would please call the roll.
Councilmember Shaw.
Here.
Yakowicz.
Present.
Neese.
Here.
Ewalt.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. Our first item up is a COVID-19 update on our agenda. Because we have also a proclamation this evening that deals with the one-year anniversary of the first diagnosis of COVID-19 in Yellowstone County, I would ask that the council approve changing our agenda slightly to move that proclamation up to before our COVID-19 update. So those two things can go together. I make that motion. Is there a second? Councilmember Neese makes a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the motion are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. With that, then, I will read our proclamation this evening and then turn it over to our County Health Officer, John Felton, for his update. Whereas every citizen of Billings has been severely impacted since the first case of COVID-19 was diagnosed in Yellowstone County on March 12, 2020. As together we've dealt valiantly with the death of loved ones, sickness, uncertainty, social isolation, economic upheaval, unemployment, and other challenges of every kind and scale. And whereas none have been impacted more by COVID-19 than those who have succumbed to the disease and their spouses, children, parents, siblings, close friends, and other loved ones who have our deepest and most sincere sympathy during this trying time. And whereas over the last 12 months, our hearts were broken by the loss of each of the 239 Yellowstone County residents who died from COVID-19, each of whom continues to be missed by their loved ones, friends, neighbors, co-workers, and our whole community. And whereas we also pause to remember the 1,382 precious individuals who have died from the disease across our state, approximately one of every 750 Montanans, and roughly 4 times the number of Montanans who have died in all wars after World War II combined, as well as their families, friends, and other close associates. And whereas we deeply appreciate the work and sacrifices over the last 12 months of each of our public health and private healthcare workers, senior care facility workers, and administrators who have cared for those who have died, recovered, and who are currently ill with COVID-19. And whereas we also appreciate and remember the family members and friends who have cared for and supported their sick loved ones when they were ill or working long hours in the service of others, as well as the strangers and regular citizens of our community who have done their part to slow the spread of COVID-19 by wearing a mask, limiting trips outside the home, maintaining 6 feet of separation, washing hands, and following other CDC guidelines to protect those around us. And now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim Friday, March 12, 2021, which is the 12-month anniversary of the first COVID-19 case diagnosed in our community, as Remembrance Day, in Billings and encourage everyone in our community to reflect on the past year, remember the sacrifices of our fellow community members, and continue to support and protect and pray for one another as we enter what we all hope and pray will be the final chapter of the coronavirus pandemic in our community. With that, I'd like to turn it over to John Felton, our County Health Officer. John?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that proclamation. It really is, in some ways, it's hard to believe it's been a year already. And in some ways, I wrote an article for our employee newsletter that described COVID years like dog years. There's been a lot that's happened in the last 12 months that has been kind of amazing to watch and be a part of. This year at 43, we were actually quite a bit higher than that earlier on. We were up over 60. But for the last 4 weeks, we have come in under 25 cases per 100,000 per day. That's in Yellowstone County, that's about 40 cases a day is 25 per 100,000. We're now pushing down into trying to get into that green zone, which is below 10 per 100,000. So a really nice reduction that we've seen over time. This increase right there, you'll recall, was where 209 old cases were identified, and they all got credited, if you will, in that week. Without that, we'd have been right about 24 again. This is looking at the test positivity rate. I just told you that the previous week was 5.1%. You see there 4.7. Each week is the newest week is partial. Not all the data are in yet. And so it typically shifts a few tenths of percent. So this, in the final number, did go above, went up to 5.1. But you can see again, we've pushed that down to a level that is nice when you're looking at, only 100 positive tests out of 2,600 last week. If you look at hospitalizations, again, you see that nice reduction. You don't see it on this, but if you go back to mid to late November, that number was over 150 per day. Now we're sitting at the low 20s, 20, 25 per day. So you can see in the pink circles, we're still experiencing a few deaths each week. That tragedy has not stopped. But the number of patients, total, the number of patients in ICU and the number of patients on ventilators has dropped. And then the last thing that I want to show you here is this is called Syndromic Surveillance. So these are the percent of cases who present at the emergency departments of our two hospitals with this constellation of symptoms, which is fever or chills, and at least one of the following: cough, difficulty breathing, or shortness of breath, which really is the case definition for both influenza and COVID. The blue line is 2019, the green line is 2020, the red line is 2021. We still, according to the state health department, there has not yet been a confirmed case of influenza in this influenza season. So as a result, we're seeing quite a reduction in the proportion of respiratory illness that's hitting the EDs. So that is also more good news. I want to just quickly share with you also, did you see that change?
Yes. Okay.
So this is called COVID Act Now. And I'd encourage you to, if you don't regularly look at this, to take a look at this website. So this is a national analysis. You can get it for any county in the nation. And this is what's being reported. So the time frames are a little off from the other data. So don't look for precise equivalency. But when you look here, you see in Yellowstone County, because it's Yellowstone County, we're under 10 cases per 100,000 for this time period. So it's a little more recent. That infection rate of 0.82, that means for every person with COVID-19 infects less than one other person, which is why our case counts are dropping. Test positivity under 4%. ICU capacity, 62%. And remember, this is not just COVID ICU capacity. This is these are all the ICU beds that are being used. And we're about 16% have had at least one dose. If you look at the colors over here, you can see Yellowstone County is yellow. We've got some green, some orange, and some red. But a few months ago, that basically the entire state was red. It shows you the tier 1A, 1B, and 1B plus. If we look at where we stand let me just get this right. This is in daily cases per 100,000. Yellowstone County is at 9.9. We're 27th in the state. The highest is Powder River, but you can see we're still sitting sort of the middle of the pack for, and there's our vulnerability level is very low. And then the last thing I want to show you here is this is what the CDC says we should be doing at this point. We should still be masking outside the home. We shouldn't be traveling much, although that's opening up. And schools should be open. You may recall that earlier on, this said, everything should be closed. Bars should be closed. Restaurants should be closed. Takeout only. No travel. Schools should be remote only. So we've really come a long ways. So overall, the story remains good. We are, in terms of restrictions, as you know, there are no restrictions in Yellowstone County that I've put into place. I rescinded all those. The governor, and that was as of January 15th, sorry. The governor rescinded all of the statewide mandates on the same January 15th, except for masking, which went away on February 12th. So the key to that really is the time frame. So we are now about 6 or 7 weeks out from the restrictions being reduced for everything except masking, and we didn't see an increase. In fact, we continue to see decreases. We are 2.5 weeks or so out from the end of the masking requirement, and we haven't seen an increase. So I think what we're seeing is people are still being careful. I think a lot of people are making good decisions on being safe. Also, once you get into a lower prevalence environment, things just get better because there's less risk, if you will, of running into someone who's infectious. So it's not to say that we won't at some point see cases go up to some degree. It's a respiratory illness, and that tends to happen. It spins up and spins down. But in terms of where we are right now, we're in a good spot. Obviously our case counts are down, our test positivity is down, and we are seeing that schools are doing fine, workplaces are doing fine. So for right now, we're really doing quite well. The other thing, of course, is the number of people getting vaccinated is going to make a difference. You can kind of think about the total population of people who've either been exposed to the disease and infected with it, plus those who are vaccinated. And when that total number gets somewhere north of about 70% of the population, then we would be into that herd immunity or population protection level. So we still have a ways to go. We still need to be careful. We still need to follow the recommended guidelines for safety, but we are going in a good direction. So with that, I will stop and be happy to answer whatever questions you might have.
Thank you very much, John. Are there questions for John? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. John, you mentioned you're going to be having the second dose at the shrine. It seems like it may be a little confusing for some who've gotten their dose there at the Metro and now they have to go somewhere else to get there. What kind of notification are you doing to make sure they follow up? And if they show up at the Metro for their second dose, is there something that you'll make sure they can still get their second dose at the shrine if they have to show up a little late?
Yeah. We're expecting that there'll be maybe a few cases. We've done direct notifications to everybody of where they need to be. If someone shows up at the wrong place, we can get them to the right place and get them taken care of. The thing is, of course, the doses will be at the shrine. So there may be a little bit of transition, but pretty quickly, I think people will really get the methodology down. And now everyone that's getting vaccinated, getting their first dose of Metro are told, here's your appointment for your second dose at the shrine. And so the real issue is just simply space. There's not enough space to do first and second doses at the Cedar Hall facility because we're now doing 4 days a week of vaccinations at Cedar Hall for first doses. So it's just a space issue.
And I appreciate it. Mayor, can I quick follow up on that?
Please.
John, have you got anything in place? I mean, if I go show up at the wrong place, I just get in my car and drive to the right place. But there could be some people coming who've taken the bus or gotten there some other way. Is there something that you'll have, some kind of transportation to help get them over there so they don't miss their appointment?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's in place for that. The first clinic is tomorrow, and since I've been out of town, I really haven't been involved in the direct planning, so I'm not sure exactly what that is. I can find that out and let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for John? Any other questions? Chris Kukulski and Councilman Tricky.
All right, just curious, John, though we don't know how many vaccinations have been given to the private suppliers, will they be reporting to you or anyone as to how many they have vaccinated so we know how many we ultimately have vaccinated in our community?
Yep. We presume that they'll make the same report to the state as everyone else does. Normally we know what comes to the community because the state is doing that distribution. We won't know that, but they should be reporting to the state, everyone that gets vaccinated, because it goes through the immunization registry.
Councilor Tricky?
So I think, we're transitioning into the point where our public media message needs to be, maintaining personal responsibility and masking and all those different type of things, but also starting to make a big push towards encouraging people to get the vaccination. I realize this is more of a Melanie question than a John question, but I'm just kind of curious if we have plans in place to get that message out.
Yeah, there is messaging going on about that. At this point, as I said, the vaccine appointments are getting snapped up really quickly. There's still a much higher demand than supply, but we do have some plans in place as when we start seeing a reduction in the utilization to make sure that we're keeping people spun up. One of the real challenges, of course, is you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So we don't want to tell everyone, now's the time to get your vaccine, and then, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are disappointed. So it's kind of a fine balance to walk, but we are aware that the time will come when we won't be filling those as rapidly, and that will be a communication point.
Thank you. Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. John, what's in place for those that are unsheltered in our population to get vaccines and to have the information on where to go to get vaccines and how to get there?
So a lot of those people, our healthcare for the homeless clinical personnel are in touch with those populations. The medical technical team, which is the group of physicians and infection control, and infection prevention professionals that advise the Unified Health Command, have identified the sheltered population, people living particularly in low-income senior housing, people residing in correction facilities with primary targets for the single-dose vaccine that is now available, the Johnson & Johnson product. I think one of the real challenges with those populations is to get that second dose in, because obviously they're right now we contact them directly. We work through our healthcare for the homeless. But when those Johnson & Johnson doses are available, which they're coming to us this week, I believe, then they're going to be targeted towards those populations that are more difficult to reach and particularly more difficult to get a second dose to.
Thank you. Any other questions for John? Councilmember Neese.
John, real quick question. Can you remind us what the restrictions are in gathering size?
There are none.
So you could have a concert and things like that, just as long as you're 6 feet apart?
Yeah, so the way the governor wrote his last directive was there are no restrictions, but people should follow CDC guidance, which really would say, making sure that your gathering sizes are limited by your ability to appropriately space. But there's not a numeric limit like we had before.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll just make an observation. I was at the home improvement show thousands of people there over the weekend, and it was disappointing. And I probably saw maybe 5-10% of the people were masked. Fortunately, it's a large open space, not a lot of intimate conversations going on over the color of concrete or the relative benefits of AstroTurf versus natural turf or whatever. But it's still a concern. People need to be continue to be careful. We don't want to go backwards this close to the end of the race.
No, and I think that's right. People are tired of this. As you said, it's been a year. But we really just need to hold on for a little while longer. The Biden administration has said that there will be sufficient vaccine to get everyone who wants to be vaccinated by the end of May. So we're going to take them at their word that vaccine will be available. Right now, everything that comes to our community is being administered. We're not having any problem getting vaccine to people. So hopefully that will continue. Then we'll move on to the 1C population and then eventually the Tier 2 population.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rotting, a final question?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, not so much a question, but just wanted to share because I hadn't heard this as a location before, but I know that Billings Urban Indian Health and Wellness Center also has vaccinations. So encourage people to go there as well. Right.
Yeah, so that's, I think one of the challenges in the vaccination process is there are multiple sources. So everything through Indian Health Service is a direct federal allocation, much as the private pharmacies will. So that information will get reported as to who's been vaccinated, but again, we don't know how many of those doses come to town. But certainly we encourage anyone who qualifies to find a way to get vaccinated as quickly as possible, and we'll all get there soon.
Thank you very much. And the Urban Indian Health Center phone numbers in the book, if there are books anymore, or on the internet, or just right across the street from the front door of St. Vincent Hospital. All right, well, let's move on. John, thank you very much for your service, and as always, and we'll see you eventually, and welcome back from your vacation. Thank you. A well-deserved break. Thank you. Okay, our next item up then is our minutes from our February 22nd meeting. These were distributed earlier. Do we have a motion or discussion? Councilmember Neese.
Make a motion that we approve the February 22nd minutes.
Motion made, second by Councilmember Boyette. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor of approval consistent with the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item up are council courtesies. I'm going to start us off here with just a recognition of the death this weekend of our long time finance director for the City of Billings, Pat Weber, who served the city for 17 years before Andy Zeller, up until 2017 or so, and did a great job for the city, knew every number backwards and forwards, and he'll be missed, and we send our condolences to his family and friends, and express our appreciation for his many, many years of service to the city. With that, other council courtesies. Councilmember Yakowicz.
Thank you, Honored Council, and thank you for your proclamation too, Mayor. I just returned from a funeral for Hug Sr. He was laid to rest in Pryor. I just wanted to recognize him, especially his son, Josiah, was a rock. He worked with the officers downtown for many years and continues to now work with the Native American Leadership Development. Mr. Huggs, interestingly, was vice chair in the 80s of the Crow tribe and also helped translate the Bible to Crow at that time as well. So many of our great men and women who've passed, and I'm just honored to recognize him for his service and his life. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Councilmember Running.
Thank you. I'm sure this was something you meant to say, Bill, but today's the International Women's Day. So just wanted to acknowledge and recognize all the women serving on city councils, serving in what have typically been traditional male roles within our city government. Public Works Department put out a really great post on social media today acknowledging the women that are working in our Public Works Department. We have many women who are working as police officers and firefighters and other different types of roles that have traditionally been male roles. So girl power, but also just wanted to put a shout out there and recognize all of the women out there that have really done amazing things. And to all of your mothers, whether they be here or in heaven, they birthed you. And so they did something magnificent for all of you just today because you're serving in such a great capacity. So just wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Other council courtesies? Seeing none, then we've had our council proclamation. Council reports. Any reports from bodies that council members serve on? Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honor. And I want to quickly mention there are 4 committees that I've been working on, and perhaps in the future we can discuss an ongoing conversation on our committees and reassigning committees, maybe even towards the end of the year. But I'm on the mayor's challenge to reduce suicide among servicemen and women, families and veterans. And Mayor Hanel put me on that originally. And then I'm honored to work with Mayor Cole. We met on February 16th. And the next meeting will be May 18th at Riverstone Health. So it's an ongoing organization, especially working with veterans, obviously, to find ways to reduce suicide among the veterans. And thanks to our city working a lot with that. And perhaps in the future, Dr. Oakley could give a report, if we wish, as she has in the past, about she's the chair of that. Also, I want to just highlight Bright and Beautiful. I'm on that committee. And April 24th, we're doing a cleanup for the city. And I just wanted to touch on March 27th will be a highway cleanup project spearheaded by the inspiration of Frank Ewalt and led by the Elks Lodge. As you know, Frank's is the one that got me on the highway a lot, but the Elks Lodge will spearhead that. I mention this in particular because we've been getting emails from people rightfully complaining about the highway. Well, I'm inviting all of them to email me, and I'd like to invite them to the highway cleanup on March 27th. And basically we'll meet at the Elks Lodge at 9 in the morning on Saturday and go from there. But not necessarily directly part of Bright and Beautiful, but inspired by Bright and Beautiful and the work there. But the main cleanup for Bright and Beautiful is April 24th as well. Also, Yellowstone County Behavioral Health Local Advisory Committee is a committee I've been assigned to by, actually with Mr. Pittman when he was on. I don't know where it went in terms of council direction, but I'm also belabor this because I'll be stepping off the council, as you know, at the end of the year. And this has been, they meet every first Thursday at noon, and they advocate for behavioral health. And they work with other behavioral health organizations. So a great organization that I would certainly like to have a council person be part of on that. And finally, suicide prevention for Yellowstone Valley meets every 3rd Monday. And September 17th, they're going to do a virtual conference on suicide prevention. This one in particular, I wasn't assigned by any council or mayor, but again, one that I would like to entertain a council member to join in the future. So those are 4 that I've been directly involved with, and I have not reported in a while on these council reports. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Yakovich, for bringing our attention to all of those. These may not be necessarily city committees, but they're important groups in the community that often benefit from having a council member, and the council certainly benefits from having people serve on them. So if you're interested in serving on any of those, certainly if it's a city committee, and I don't know that any of those are, talk to Councilmember Yakovich and myself, but if they're not, please contact Councilmember Yakovich and he'll see what he can do to get you appointed following whatever procedure that group has for naming board members. And thank you for your service, Councilmember Yakovich. Other council reports? Then we'll move on to our city administrator report, Chris Kukulski.
Mayor and Council, thanks. And thanks, Penny. I'll just give a shout out and a thank you to all of our female public servants at the city. Penny mentioned the Post and International Women's Day today. Also, thank you, Mayor, for recognizing Mr. Weber's service to the citizens for about 17 years here in Billings. So with that, I've got a handful of others. Sent out an email earlier today. This one is on item 1C. So it's on the consent agenda. And I would ask that the council entertain, and thank you, Roy, Councilmember Neese, for catching this, a motion that you've got as a consideration of an amendment or an alternative motion there on 1C. Doesn't mean you have to take it off consent, but if you'd separate it, the issue there is simply that typically either A, at the time of development, we will get right-of-way free, or from time to time we do purchase right-of-way for projects. But no, we ordinarily don't do both, which is purchase right-of-way and pay for your road upgrade. So in this case, I think there's an improvement there. The council's comfortable with that 1C email. Next up is a legislative update. So starting to get back into the swing of things. So just a reminder, Greg Dorrington and Amy Gramales, they will be with us a week from tonight. They'll give a mid-session report and what they see coming into the second half. I will tell you, I got to spend, Representative Mercer gave me an hour, almost a full hour of his time today. We got caught up on his perspective of the first half and what he anticipates second half. And not too surprising there, budget and marijuana with recreational marijuana and how the state will handle that and how it affects us is certainly something that Greg, Amy, and Bill Mercer all agreed was going to be very dominant this second half of the session. Just a couple of other things to highlight. This week, Wednesday, a former Councilmember Brewster's House Bill 255 is up Wednesday afternoon at 3 on the Senate side. We are working to make a tweak to that. We're fully supportive, but we think there's still some vague language there. We want it to be just crystal clear. If there is a local government appointee, and I believe the statute provides the county one and the city one, no ambiguity that that appointee, no matter what reason they are, the vacancy exists, that it would be the governing body who would fill that vacancy. Like that simplified, and former Councilmember Brewster, Representative Brewster, has been working with us on that. And then also House Bills 578 and House Bill 584, both dealing with incarceration and the jail and reporting. Neither of those hearings are set yet over on the Senate side. So they made it over to the Senate, but we don't have those hearings as of yet. When we get those, we'll push that word out. Afterwards, be glad to answer any questions you have on legislative components. Next up, I want to give you a heads up when you get your packet for March the 22nd, you'll notice that the Blaines annexation, the applicant has requested that they split what was one application for 40 acres. They've split that now into 220s, one half that was already zoned in the county, and the other half that is currently, they need both a zone change and annexation. You'll also see a new an approach there for that second one relative to the timing of the development agreement to try to avoid kind of the pickle we found ourselves in relative to the landowner and the city coming back within a short period of time, say 60 days, with the development agreement. And if that development agreement can't be agreed to by both parties, then the annexation won't be filed, and we don't find ourselves having to reverse anything of previous decisions there. Next up is our community room progress. So I want to thank Gavin Walcher, Tim Harrington, David Watterson, and you, Council. Amazing, mostly because of those three, I'm sure, but also the threat that they were going to come tonight and explain to you what's going on, they being the consultant or the contractor. And they were in town Friday, they were in town Saturday, and it's my understanding this afternoon, all equipment is installed and they will be testing tomorrow afternoon. Now, that sounds all well and good. I don't need any answers on this, but I need you to be thinking about things. We are not ready to get and can't get 20, 30 people into that room. And we need to talk about how many of you literally want to meet live. And maybe even more importantly, I've been a little guilty here of perfect becoming the enemy of good, which is, what are your expectations on public engagement? Prior to the pandemic, of course, you could email your council member, always can do that, or show up at the meeting. What's quite complex for our staff will be to try to do all things: phone calls, Zoom by the public, people in the audience, and there's no work to the email. So please be thinking about and communicate back with me what your expectations are, particularly with the public engagement with our council meetings there. Let's see. Clarification in the weekly report. I did talk about budget hearings, so I don't think I've heard back from anybody. If you could give me some feedback, Andy and I, we think there's some real advantages to the way that we're proposing it this year. There's no less time being spent, no less effort, but by consolidating them on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we think maybe everybody's heads will be in kind of budget mode. It'll also provide more time between that last presentation and actually the night that we would anticipate adopting, so that if the council wants to go back and spend more time on a particular part of the budget, we can do that. Then wrapping things up, there's no ex parte communication. And I believe, Mayor and Council, that covers mine, unless you have any questions for me.
Thanks for that detailed report. That wins a prize. Councilmember Purington.
Okay, so Chris, on the expectations for public engagement, I don't know what the expectations could be, because I think the last I heard you were talking council in the council chambers, the public would be at the library. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Purington. So I think of it kind of like three buckets. There's the council. Does the council want to have the options of in-person and Zoom? There's the staff. Do you want them to have the options in-person and Zoom? And then on the public side, we now have emails. They'll always have emails. We have phone call. So are we going to keep an ability to call in and add Zoom and add in person? And I will tell you, that's the one in particular for the clerk and for the staff, that the more options we provide there, the more staff and complexity there's going to be to running the meeting effectively, trying to keep track of all three. Or really, is it just which one or two are you expecting, at least in the near term? I will tell you, it is my hope long term that we do figure out if statutorily it's allowed to continue Zoom engagement by the public and the council. Long term, I'd like to figure that out, but it's going to take some effort to do that.
And so follow up, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just a second, Councilmember Purington. I'm just going to pass on a little information I got from our clerk. My understanding is that our clerks are working on a capability for involving members of the public on our Zoom call, using a waiting room, not unlike if you've testified in Helena at the legislature, you'd go on the list and then we'd be able to hear public comment on Zoom, but not see them. I assume that was how it would work. The problems our clerks have is they can't manage all of those balls at the same time and keep them all in the air. And if they're in the room physically, they can't be talking on the phone out loud with people. They can manage it silently on the screen, but they can't be talking on the phone. So that's one of the some of the issues, but they are working on the technology to make sure we'd have the capability to include the public via Zoom. Councilmember Purington, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to follow up. So that means, Chris, that everyone would be at the library.
Well, we were looking at, we weren't looking at multiple locations to run the meeting. So there would be a location, be the library or City Hall. Then the question is, those who are not at the meeting, how are they going to engage, be it the public or elected officials or staff? And the mayor just nailed part of that complexity of the clerk trying to juggle so many balls that the phone actually becomes quite difficult if you're in a room with folks. And recognize, though, I would say, and I came back from the legislature, for my one testifying in person going, hey, we need to do that. Easier said than done. You have to sign up 24 hours in advance if you're going to testify. So they've got a much more rigid system of who's getting in and who's controlling who gets to speak and how long you get to speak, et cetera. So that's part of our challenge we're trying to work through. One location or home in kind of the hybrid fashion.
Councilor Biakwich.
Thank you, Honor, and thank you, Council, and thank you, Mr. Kukulski, for working on this. I would hope that we could even direct staff for a date, whether it be March 22nd in 2 weeks from now or in April. But I think it's good that we set a clear date to get back. I think if we keep on kicking this can down the road, we won't be solving things till December. I'm just saying. So along with that, I believe our goal is 1, 2, 3. It's not all three at the same time. The council, we have allowed public comment in the past to write emails or visit us, and they certainly can visit us at the library. They just don't have to stay there, or they can get in line, or we will have a police officer there who will guide them. So I don't think we need to be too complicated here. We as council need to set the standard that we are not afraid of the virus, that we need to get back together. We have to reassure the community that we are leaders and we're willing to lead. Now, if there's a fear of COVID or health problems or whatever, I get it. I get that. But the library is big enough with a clear plan that I would hope the mayor, myself, you, anybody, we can make a clear plan. Wear your mask until you get inside, sit down, no, shaking hands and all that. Clearly sit, and then you don't move until. All this. Forgive me, we're adults. We could figure this out. But to stay like this here because of fear or all this other stuff, I just think it's not good as leaders of the community. So thank you, Mr. Kukulski, for helping us get this way. And I'm just throwing out that we should set a date now, to start this action, get this going. Thank you, Honor.
Thank you very much. I see 3 hands. I'll just comment. I have asked staff or suggested that we be developing a written plan with a lot of these details that could be distributed to the council. So we have something to shoot at, something to respond to with those kind of details. And Chris has indicated a desire to do that. So a lot of hands. I'm a Councilmember Treacy, Neese, Shaw, and Brown. Treacy, Neese, Shaw, and Brown.
Mayor Cole just said one of the things that I think is really important to me. It is not about a date. It is about a procedure. It is making sure that we have a procedure in place and that procedure is in place. And then, the date follows. Leadership comes in a lot of different forms. And depending on exactly how you view what is going on in here right now, leadership is going to mean a lot of different things. I do not agree that we are at a point with the virus that leadership means encouraging people to get back together face to face. It is just the wrong message right now until we know that our vaccination rates are up in the 60s or 70s. And it's also the wrong message until we know exactly what's going on with the variants. I read an article today that the South African variant is starting to show up a lot in the United States, and the current vaccines are 1/10 of the effectiveness as they are against the original variant. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying. We need to encourage people to get back up and engaged in the economy. But I also have to say that leadership often means telling people something that they don't want to hear in order to keep them safe. So until I see real data telling me about what that process should be and when the right times are to actually pull the trigger on those things, I cannot agree to that. And I do hope that as long as those things are happening, if council does choose to meet in face-to-face, that they will wear a mask as long as they are around other people. That's one of the biggest things, my biggest worries is being in a room with 10, 20, 30 other people for hours and hours and hours. So, those are my thoughts and fears on this. Thanks, Chris, for getting this together and giving us the option. That's great. I'm glad to hear that you were able to get the integrators to step up and make it happen. But let's get a plan in place before we, just run out there and send the wrong message to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmembers Neese, Shaw, and Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to agree with Councilmember Yakowicz that I would like to see a set a date. However, I also agree that, if you look at as far as our leadership, we do need to lead by example, and there needs to be some policies that we as the council need to set. So I think that Chris has asked us, do we want to, how do we want to meet this? I think in my the way I would like to see the procedure written, and like Danny says, I think we should have masks. So if we're meeting in a room, there should be masks involved. I think that the procedure should be in place if we're going to have public there, we don't need to have phone conversations as well. We've allowed them to come down, so I don't think we should be mixing the two. I think once we start opening up to public, I think we should not have the phone complication. And I think we as a council just need to make that recommendation. If you can hear from us, Chris, what you think the council is leading with, and then present something to us, I think we could then adjust it from there. But the sooner the better. And I think it would show. One other thing I was saying is listen to our health professionals. We just heard a great update from COVID report. However, if certain triggers were to hit, then that would be part of the policy. We may have to then suspend some in-person meeting to, go back to, Zoom meetings. So there should be some triggers in place that we're following as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmembers Shaw and Brown.
Thank you. I'll be fast. So my personal opinion on this is that if we're talking about leadership and following the health officers' guidelines and everything that's being put before us, the date at which I feel like I will personally feel very comfortable meeting again is when vaccines are widespread in our community enough that everyone who wants them can get them. Then it really is a matter of personal responsibility of people can choose to get vaccinated or not. Right now, people don't have that choice. And so cramming us into a room, I think, sends the wrong message to the community in terms of what we should be doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown.
I guess my opinion is I'm less worried about getting the council and everybody in the same room, but I do agree that we've got to figure out a better way for public comment. We've been going a year with kind of the phones and getting 2 or 3 calls, and people are sitting on hold. They hang up. They don't call back. They we're really doing them an injustice. We're supposed to be accessible. They're supposed to be able, to face their elected officials and get their point across. And I think I'm less worried about the date or anything else the council gets back together. I'm good either way. I'm an adult. I know how to wear a mask. I know how to do all those things. But we've got to figure out how to let our public comment better than they are. There's got to be a better way.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else for our council, our city administrator report before we move on to public comment on non-public hearing items? Councilmember Trickey.
Just one thing about the public comment thing. There are a lot of people who cannot physically make it to our meetings, whether it's because of timing, whether they, willingness to sit in a meeting for 5 hours or whatever. I believe that having the phone access is probably the best way to ensure that everybody who can't physically make it to a meeting can participate. Zoom would be nice. I know from an administrative position, it was the easiest one to actually pull off, but most people have access to phones, and it's the technology that most people are actually the most comfortable with. So while I don't believe that we've figured out how to do the phone thing as best as we possibly can do the phone thing, I would really hate to see us lose that means of contacting us during the meetings. It's face-to-face is nice. I firmly believe in face-to-face, but a lot of people can't do that for a lot of reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Brown.
I guess I just have a question. Is this a council decision or is this a decision to be made by the mayor? He
Definitely a council
meetings,
decision,
correct?
Councilmember Brown.
Okay.
No, I don't know. That's a very important fundamental threshold issue. If it falls to me, I would definitely want your input and not want to do anything that didn't have a majority behind it, even if it's in sort of an advisory capacity. So, but good question, Councilmember Trickey.
I would suggest we put it on a future agenda and have public hearings on it and make a decision, because it has some pretty serious impacts.
Councilor Purington.
I think the people that called in on the phone are normally people that would come in. I don't know that the phone was that big of an asset for some of those outside of what a regular meeting would look like with them coming in person. So I don't know, Chris, maybe put off a checklist of what we could do, figure out what the majority has, and we'll kind of go from there. I don't know. I think it's getting too complicated right now at this point. But thanks for asking the question.
So Chris, just because we do want to keep the ball moving, at our next meeting, could we have some sort of call it written report, drafts, outline, just something we know that we're making progress? Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, yes, we can both use the weekly and our Mondays to continue the dialogue. And I understand the more information we get ahead of meetings like this, the better. And we're going to learn some tomorrow when we actually do some testing in the room tomorrow. I think you guys have really nailed it. The most politically sensitive piece is probably how many options do you want to give the public to engage? And that's going to be the biggest staff workload component. The more options there are, the more it's going to be juggling balls and people needing to manage those. So think about that. Email me, and we will be reporting back and keep the discussion moving forward.
Okay, let's hear from Councilmember Ewell, because we haven't heard from Councilmember Ewell, and then we'll move on to public comment on non-hearing items. This has been a very valuable discussion. Councilmember Ewell.
Thank you, Mayor. Isn't there some sort of state statute that regulates how city councils are supposed to meet? I know the city council person I filled her seat is she was gone and she couldn't participate even though she wanted to because of state statute. And I know we're kind of under an emergency deal right now, but I think it's time that the governor came out and said that you can do all this stuff. John Felton says he has no restrictions. What's that?
Oh, you just froze a little bit, but good point. You're right. There are state statutes and our open meeting laws, and there's an attorney general opinion interpreting that in the governor's state of emergency, which also exists locally, both of which are still in effect. So we do have some latitude there, and it's essentially a rule of reasonableness. But if those get lifted, then we would have to go back to those state statutory requirements. Gina Dahl is with us. I don't know if she wants to comment further before we go to public comment on non-hearing items. But Gina, if you want to weigh in, please feel free on the legal requirements out there.
Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, I don't have all of that stuff committed to memory, but I'd be happy to provide a report if there are any specific questions about what that AG opinion says.
And as we say, I think still working under the option right now. And Councilmember Ewald, you're correct. Prior to this pandemic, you couldn't be on a phone and be in this council meeting. You couldn't be on Zoom and be in this council meeting as an elected official. Now, I will tell you, for getting, and this is just my opinion, getting the best of the best on the council, I hope we learn something here that allows technology to, from time to time, let a person participate if one of you are traveling or unavailable. But those are decisions that will need to be made statutorily, and we may be back to this technology isn't on the table, but for now, it is. Nothing's been reversed that allows us to do these for not only you, but public feedback as well.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Again, valuable input there. Please keep it coming by email conversation amongst other council members and with the city administrator. Let's move then to public comment on non-public hearing agenda items. Tonight, that is item number 1, our consent agenda only. So if you are a member of the public and you'd like to be heard on any of the sub-items under our consent agenda, that's item number 1, please call this number immediately. The number is 237-6196. I'll say that again a couple times. It's area code 406, local number, 237-6196. Call that number immediately to comment on item number 1. The other 4 items on our agenda, items 2, 3, 4, and 5, are all public hearings. And so you'll have an opportunity to comment on those items later. This is only for public comment now on item number 1, subparts A through I. And please keep your comments to less than 3 minutes. Tell us your name and address up front. And please turn off or turn way down your screen, your television or your computer, because our actual meeting is at least a minute ahead of what you're probably seeing. And so it's very confusing if you don't silence those other sounds coming in. Again, that phone number, 237-6196. You might want to write that number down. It'll be the same number for the rest of the evening. 237-6196. Tony, do we have anyone who has called in for public comment on non-public hearing agenda item number 1?
We do. We have Patrick Klugman on the line, and he's been holding for a while. Let me get him just a moment. Patrick, are you still there? Okay, let me get you on speaker. Thank you for your call, and you may go ahead.
Excellent. Can you hear me, Mayor and Council? This is Patrick Klugman.
Yes.
Fantastic. Mayor and Council members, Patrick Klugman with Big Sky Economic Development at 222 North 32nd Street, Suite 200. Tonight, I wanted to just have an opportunity to just briefly speak to Agenda item 1B, talk to a little bit about acknowledge the $9,000 contribution from the Cockatoo Foundation and John Urbiska regarding Colson Park and the development of Colson Park, something that is just a dynamite thing to talk about. Very excited. This, as we know, we've talked about previously regarding Colson Park, we have a unique opportunity of $250,000 challenge grant to take that $250,000 and bring $500,000 towards the development of Colson Park. This $9,000 will be matched dollar for dollar. So really it's an $18,000 contribution towards, again, the development of that park. Big Sky Economic Development, myself, have been meeting with multiple different community stakeholders and entities, organizations, individuals, companies, the gamut, to be able to provide the presentation, talking about the exciting renderings and the development of Colson Park. And we're excited to say that we've received just over $60,000 in different contributions towards the development of that park and heading towards that $250,000 challenge grant. And I believe we're going to have some additional conversation a week from tonight to discuss some additional park systems and some of the support to the park system. But more so than anything, again, I wanted to jump on, say hello, acknowledge this great contribution, investment towards our park system, specifically to Colson Park. And while we're got a lot more to go, we're still ready to run that road, and we're going to be able to continue to move towards the development of Colson Park. Thanks so much for the opportunity to jump on tonight, and everyone have a great evening.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you, Tony. Any other callers to 237-6196?
Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address?
Tashina Duran, P.O. Box 312, Billings, Montana 59107.
Go ahead.
I would like to know if there is any plans for implementing a sort of a time limit to reply to public emails. And that would be it. Thank you.
We have your email address, and I think you have ours, Tashina. If you'd like to email that comment, we can certainly respond to you after we do some research.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good night.
I do not have any more phone calls.
Okay, thank you very much, callers. Thank you, Tony. We'll close the public comment period on item number 1. And
I'm sorry, I am getting another call right now.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead, put them on.
Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
Hi, my name is Amanda Martin, and my our address is P.O. Box 312, Billings, Montana 59107. And I just wanted to know, what can we do as people in the common public to do to help increase community relations personally and publicly? And that's all.
Okay, thank you for your call.
Thank you very much.
Okay, public comment then is closed on item number 1, and we'll move to separations for separate vote. I do think we need to have a separate discussion and vote on item 1C that was addressed by Chris Kukulski going in, and you should have an email from Debbie Melling from about 3:29 this afternoon addressing that issue, but we'll ask for further staff clarification. So we'll separate that one on my request. Other separations, Councilmember Brown.
Can't find the darn button. Thank you. I will be abstaining from I1 and 2. That's 1I, 1 and 2.
Thank you very much. Other separations, Councilmember Purington?
I'd like to separate H, adoption of the 2021 and 2022 council priorities.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other separations? Don't see, Councilmember Neese?
No, my separation has already been done. I was going to make a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Please do.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt the consent agenda other than the separated items C and H and items I, 1, and 2.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Councilmember Joy? Okay, so we have a motion for approval of the and seconded the non-separated items. Is there discussion on these items? Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. I just wanted to really give a special comment, first of all, to the Urbaska family for that really generous donation regarding Colson Park. But I really wanted to let the council know about the generous donation by Barbara Garrett of the $15,000. So God bless Mike Whitaker. I think if he receives one more email from me hounding him on senior equipment in parks, I'm probably going to get a nasty email back from him. But Barbara Garrett has really been a leader in our community for moving forward senior equipment within our city public parks. And she's just really put her money where her mouth is. And so I really want to compliment her and thank her. Barbara Garrett has been wonderful. She's an amazing artist, and she's one who has been sending City Council through the years depictions of different renderings she's painted of the rims in different places in Billings, and we even had one of her paintings at City Council one day. But she's been a real leader in our community to making sure our public spaces, especially our parks, also serve our seniors, and not just with benches, but with actual equipment where seniors can move and participate and enjoy our city parks as well. So really wanted to give her a big shout out and thank her for that really generous $15,000 donation. That's tremendous.
Thank you very much, Councilor Ronning. I just want to second that. It is very generous, and Barbara has been a huge addition. We just heard about Colson Park, and you'll see in the kind of the marketing materials for raising funds for Colson Park by Big Sky Economic Development, a beautiful picture of Sacrifice Cliffs that she generously donated for that effort as well. So she really has put not just her money where her mouth is, but her time and her talent. So thank you again and for that generosity. Councilmember Joy, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I just wanted to make a little comment about Wicks Lane improvements. There is a constituent who talked to me one time about the big storm that we got on Father's Day and the fact that he lives on a street that's unimproved that caused water to come up to his doorstep because it was a very large storm. And without that drainage, that's exactly what happens on some unimproved streets. So I would like to say that, you know, that investment is $3 of city dollars to $1 of property owner. That's a very good deal. The city will really see forward the improvement to our infrastructure from these kinds of improvements. And property owners will see those same improvements. I know that sometimes in the legislature, there are a lot of comments about how cities manage our infrastructure. But this is a very good deal. $3 city dollars to $1 property owner's dollar is a good investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Purington.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, in addition to what Penny was talking about on the donation, we have Barbara Grant on here. Is her name Garrett? Okay.
Yeah, well, just a typo.
Okay. Well, thank you again for that. And my question was to Mike Whitaker. How far does that go? And who picks what is going to be put out there in Country Manor Park?
Well, thank you, Councilmember Puritan. What we hope to do is create an accessible walkway to the shelter out there, and also add an addition and form a loop trail at that park. So now hopefully in the near future, that shelter will be accessible to someone who is physically disabled.
Thank you. And we'll turn back to Councilmember Purington, but I'm just curious, do you need additional donations to make those things happen, Mike?
We don't know at this point. We're still in the process of pulling together the design and layout, and we're going to be getting a couple quotes within the next couple of weeks. We'll know at that time. Thank you.
Councilmember Purington, you had something else?
Just to follow up to that, because we've talked about this with Poly Vista. So if Ms. Grant or Garrett had, given the $15,000 and say, I want to get this done, and rather than donate it to the park, but she gets outside, just citizens or whomever to do that work, would that have been possible? And would those dollars go any further?
Councilmember Purington, yes, that would be possible. But the process would be that she would have to do the design and we would have to approve the design and specs. And she would also have to run the project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on the non-separated items? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I wasn't aware there was a typo in this when I made the motion. Will this be corrected in the permanent record? Because this is a sizable donation and we should get the donor's name right.
Yes, absolutely. It's a typo. We will get it corrected. And it doesn't, you can move to do it, but you don't have to. We will get it corrected.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, Councilmember Ewald. Councilmember Ewald, you're still on mute.
One B about let's see, Poly Vista Park, the $136,000. I was under the assumption that was what it was going to cost to do the consulting, and then when you get down to regular item number 4, it reads, this Park District 1 budget amendment will increase the F21 budget for consulting services related to Poly Vista by $136,000. So how much more is it going to be if this is just an increase?
Councilmember Ewald, that's basically the budget amendment is coming from the $1 million that's in the CIP for fiscal year 22. So there will not be an increase. We're seeking spending authority at this point to keep the project moving.
So follow up, Mayor, please.
Please.
So I'm to assume that this was a false statement on the fiscal effects on regular item 4, where it says it's going to be an increase to the consulting services, and the actual consulting services are only $136,335.
I would correct me, Mike or Andy Zeller. I think what's happening is it is an increase to this year's budget, but a decrease from what's anticipated next year. So it's a no net actual increase of cost, but that's how I was interpreting it. But maybe somebody can set us straight. Councilmember Ewald?
You're not understanding. It says it's an increase to the consulting services related. So that means there's a prior amount for consulting services and this is an increase to it. Is that true or is that not true? What's the total consulting services? I don't care what year it is. What's the total consulting services contract for Poly Vista?
Mike Whitaker or Andy, whoever.
Councilmember Ewald, the total contract for consulting services will be $185,576. That's the total contract for consulting services. But keep in mind, we've already spent some of those dollars on the project. That includes the 30% design.
So the total is $185,000, not $136,000 like it says.
The $136,000 is the $136,000 is the amendment to the existing consulting contract.
Okay, it doesn't say that in 1B description. That's why I was questioning it.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion on the non-separated items? Councilmember Neese.
Just to clarify Frank's question is, Mike, there is, after the 136,000, there is no more consulting fees that's going to be paid on that project, correct?
Councilmember Neese, you're correct.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else before we move to a vote on the non-separated items? Don't see any, so the motion is for approval made by Councilmember Neese, seconded by Councilmember Joy. If in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Brings us then to our first separated item, item 1C. Chris, I'll just turn it to Debbie unless you had some introduction here again.
No, Debbie's sent the email to you of the motion, and I'll let her explain it. Thank you.
Okay, and Debbie, after you sent your email, I responded to you and to council members suggesting some additional language at the end. Did you see my email to that effect? Okay,
I did.
So if you could kind of comment on that also as part of your presentation here and tell us if that proposed language meets with your approval as well. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'm sorry that was such a late email to you all today. I hope everyone got a chance to read it. But it came to our attention today. And unfortunately, when we start through a project, we follow kind of a typical process. In this case, we were following our resolution, which is how you purchase property, but also just, we get appraisals and we make those offers. So we've kind of started through that. And then it was, we're reminded today that we weren't charging property assessments on this, which makes it pretty unique. We rarely do that. And we've talked about that before. The SBIRT is really one of the only places we've seen that happen. So the question was asked whether we should be paying for the right-of-way and paying for the assessment. And so I threw out an alternative so that you could read that. Really, there are 3 options. I threw 2 alternatives out. That makes 3. You could approve it as it's presented, which means we would purchase the right-of-way. I think the total is right around $13,000 total for the 4 parcels. Or you could ask staff to go back and try to get that donated and have the property assessments paid for with TIF money the way it was planned. Or you could ask us to go back, pay for the right-of-way, but put together a resolution to bring to you for approval that basically offsets those costs with a resolution for property assessments for those 4 property owners, basically making it a net zero for those 4 properties. So happy to answer any questions. I hope I explained that well. I did put a motion in the email and then Mayor Cole added to it. I think the addition was good. It basically clarifies what the process will be. So again, any questions, I can try to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, do you get that? Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know who this would be for, but have these property owners been paying taxes on that property out to the center line of the street? Or where do they pay property taxes on what part of that property?
Their property to date has included that. So any assessments that are based on square footage would have included this area.
So follow up, Mayor.
Please.
So they're actually paying property taxes on that land. And so once the street goes in, that will decrease their property taxes by how many frontage feet?
So the square foot of their parcel will be decreased by a little bit different in each case because the right-of-way was different in each case and their frontage is different. So each right-of-way agreement shows the square footage, and those assessments would be reduced based on a different number for each of the 4.
Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Purrington.
Are these property owners, are they already expecting the city to pay for those right-of-ways?
I think they are expecting, because that was the conversation when the process started. The process started, as Debbie explained, with us purchasing right of way and them participating in the street construction. It was the good observation of one of your peers who caught that, well, hold it, we never really intended to do both, right? We're going to pay for your right of way, give you a free street, and apparently lower your taxes in the future as the assessment area goes down.
So would it be appropriate, and I think I read the mayor's real quickly, his addendum to that motion, to see if they would donate it, because it's going to decrease their taxes, plus they're not going to be paying for the street assessment. Is that correct?
I think you are. That is correct. We were thinking of two things. One, to avoid coming back to you. And secondly, frankly, explaining to them what you've approved tonight. It's a little unique, but I think it's extraordinarily fair in this case because of what they're getting for a street paid for by Sabura versus themselves. But yes, in a worst case scenario, we could be back to you saying, we have a landowner who won't cooperate. How will that ultimately affect the street project? We hope that's not the case, because they really are benefiting about 3 different ways here.
Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Debbie, for looking into this and presenting these options. I didn't hear you speak to what the mayor's proposal was with that additional sentence in there. Would that not give what you need on something like this, or should we just go ahead and make the motion based upon what you initially presented?
You know, what I read in there basically added process to it that I think was general enough that we could do either of the options we're looking at. I don't know if Gina has seen a copy of that or not yet. Maybe I'll shoot it to her to see if she has any issues while we're talking.
A copy was sent to Gina about the same time. Just to remind anybody who hasn't seen the email correspondence, Debbie's original motion would have said, quote, I move to accept the right-of-way and warranty deeds for Hallowell Lane at no cost to the city, using either assessments to offset the right-of-way cost or accepting the deeds as donations to the city. And then I proposed adding, comma, as determined by subsequent negotiations between staff and the property owners, and subject to the city council's approval of any additional documentation that may be deemed necessary by staff. So that was the proposed language. I'm going to recognize Councilmember Yakovich, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Neese, you weren't done. Go ahead, Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Yakovich.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to make the motion and to move to accept the right-of-way and warranty deed for Holloway Lane at no cost to the city, using either assessments to offset the right-of-way cost for accepting the deeds as donations to the city as determined by the subsequent negotiation between staff and the property owners, and subject to the city's council's approval of any additional documentation that may be deemed necessary by staff.
Thank you very much. Second by Councilmember Boyette. And Councilmember Neese, if you didn't have anything further, I'll recognize Councilmember Yakovich.
I'm good, thank you.
Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honor and Council. Debbie, was this the same process with Hallowell and Orchard?
I would have to go look back at Orchard and Calhoun and see if there was any right-of-way on either of those. They were not assessed, so let me do a little bit of quick research and see if we actually purchased right-of-way on any of those. I couldn't tell you. Those were quite a while ago, and I don't remember.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ewell.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this time important? Could this be brought back in 2 weeks after we get some of this decided? Because I understand what Mike's saying. You charge them, if you didn't charge them on another street, now you're going to charge them on this street. I'm all for having everything in writing and done and said before we pass it on city council. And unless this is a a very time-sensitive deal that if we don't get it done tonight, the street's not going in this year. If it can wait 2 weeks, I would be willing to table this for 2 weeks and bring it back on the next consent agenda after it's been ironed out.
Debbie?
So Orchard and Calhoun are both very different streets. Hallowell is a local street. Orchard and Calhoun are both arterials. So I think there are some differences just inherent to the projects themselves. And just because maybe we did that 10 years ago in one of those two streets, I don't know if it has to be completely similar. That being said, no, there isn't a time on this. If we want to delay this a couple of weeks and have us give you some more research or do some more research and give you more information, it won't slow the project down.
And I'm sorry, for Councilmember Ewell, if I could just add, as Debbie said, it's not a problem from the project. I would just say it's your time and staff time. So it will take more staff time and your time to bring it back, but whatever your prerogative is, that's what we'll do.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ewell?
So I'd like to make a substitute motion that we table this until we get this ironed out a little bit better. So when we actually say, I do, it's, we know what we're signing our names to. This way it's pretty much up in the air, and we could create more problems than we solve.
Okay, so there's a motion to delay this. There wasn't a specific date, so I'm going to interpret that, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Ewald, to just delay it to a future date to be determined by staff on the assumption they'll bring it back as quickly as possible.
Yep. Sounds good to me.
Okay, so that's the motion, and there's a second by Councilmember Yakwich. Are you seconding it, Councilmember Yakwich? Okay. Okay, and that would be a substitute motion because that would replace the first one. Gina Dahl, you turned on your camera. I just want to make sure you didn't want to comment on the procedure or anything else here.
No, thank you, Your Honor. I was just wanting to clarify that Councilmember Ewald wasn't actually wanting to table it, and Your Honor clarified that. So that's all. Okay, yeah, just a delay to an uncertain date, I guess. Councilmember Neese on the substitute motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I will not be supporting a substitute motion. It's pretty clear to me that the way I look at this is kind of double dipping, and whether what's brought to us, if we address it now or in 2 weeks tonight, I would not vote for us to pay for the right of way at the same time and also give them a free sidewalk and street improvements, and then also allow, the taxes are going to be lowered as well. That's something I didn't consider, but Councilman Ewald brought to my attention. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Further discussion on the substitute motion, Councilmember Joy.
I won't be supporting the substitute motion. I think the original motion takes into account the situation well enough that it can be worked through. I didn't support having 100% of the properties of this improvement being paid for by Sabur to begin with. So I'm not interested in supporting, even though the substitute motion is to bring it back. What's happened on other streets aren't particularly important. The council has already voted to do 100%, to have the Sabur pay 100%. So I won't be supporting the substitute motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the discussion on the substitute motion. Any further discussion? If not, we're Councilmember Yakwich.
Thank you, Honor. I guess a major reason I'm always concerned is we promise people something and then we tell them something different. And the Sabura never told Hallowell people what we're talking about now. So I understand be fair is fair, but if you tell a whole community one thing and then we flip, I just think that's not the best way. So I support this, what Mr. Ewald has proposed.
Thank you. Deb, you turned your screen on. Would you like to chime in here?
I just wanted to clarify. I just got information that we did not purchase right of way on Calhoun or Orchard. So I wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Purington?
Just to make sure that I understand, Frank's motion is basically just to wait to see which option we're going to have. I agree with Roy that, I don't think we need to pay for the whole thing. I'd like to see one or the other. Either they donate it, or I don't even know that the Suburban needs to pay for it. So what are our options being if we wait the 2 weeks, other than just knowing specifically what's going to happen? Is that what the options are?
I'll try to comment there and then let staff or others. I guess if we put it off, staff will just go back to the property owners and see what kind of deal can be cut. If the motion, Councilmember Neese's motion passes, it's kind of the same result in that they would still have to agree. Either way, we're going to need the agreement of the property owners. We can't unilaterally dictate to them on this. Councilmember Ewell, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The reason I brought this up is, what if one of those property owners says, no, I'm not going to do it? Do we just put a safety bump out in the street there and don't and curb around it? That's my point. I'd like to see this stuff cut and dried before we actually say, yes, I'm going to vote for it. We could have two property owners say, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I agree with Roy's motion that they don't need to get their cake and eat it too. So, but we need to know which way it's going to go before we say, okay, yep, I'm voting for it this way. And that's the only reason I made the substitute motion.
Thank you. Debbie, maybe you could clarify. I guess I assume this is kind of an all or nothing deal. All the property owners or none. Can you clarify on that? Good point.
I was just trying to think through that, actually. The city council has the ability by state law to, at any time, require a property owner to be assessed for certain work, that being curb, gutter, sidewalk, other improvements. So if we had one or two of them say they would donate the right of way and we needed to create a resolution for one or two of them, that's paperwork that we would need to bring back and a resolution we'd have to pass. So I think it could be split. It would be a lot of paperwork for one or two properties, but it would get the job done.
Okay. Further discussion on the substitute motion. Again, the substitute motion is to delay. We'll proceed to a vote then. All in favor of the substitute motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are Council Members Yakowicz, Ewald, Purington. Okay, if voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition are Council Members Ronning, Tricky, Boyette, Joy, Brown, Shaw, Neese, and Cole. Motion fails, brings us back to the underlying motion. You've heard the motion. Further discussion on the underlying motion. I guess the only thing I'll chime in here is Councilmember Ewald's point is a good one. Until we have the negotiation has occurred, we don't really know what the result will be. And it might have the same effect as the original substitute motion here. This may get put back on a shelf, but at least this way, in my mind, the landowners know that if they agree to this, it's kind of a done deal. The council has already approved it, and that'll add some certainty going forward, I hope. But I predict there's the possibility that staff may have to come back with some other detail on this. I don't know. Other discussion, though, on the motion for approval. Again, the motion is to accept the warranty deeds at no cost to the city, using either assessments to offset the right-of-way cost or accepting the deeds as donations as determined by subsequent negotiations between staff and the property owners, and subject to the city council's approval of any additional documentation that may be deemed necessary by staff. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are Council Members Ronning, Cole, Tricky, Boyette, Purington, Joy, Brown, Shaw, and Neese. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition are Council Members Yakowicz and Ewald. Thank you very much. That resolves that item 1C. Next item up, item 1H, Councilmember Purington. These are the 2021-22 council priorities. This was your separation. Would you like to start our discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, I had sent an email earlier to you and to Chris as well that I wasn't comfortable with the priorities as set forth, and we had a little bit of discussion on the first. I went back through the work session, and there still was nothing real definitive with that. I think there still needs to be some tweaking of that, and some of the ongoing projects that continue on without policy, other than we have to approve, certain paychecks, that sort of thing, or work orders. Then also there was quite a bit in there, 2 different places about the Inner Belt Loop and the Billings bypass as far as infrastructure. I think we need to look at more policy-driven means of how do we do that? How do we do that development? Because I don't know that it needs to be specifically to any one area. So anyway, I would move that we separate this out and bring it on as a work session. I know we talked about public safety in a work session. We're not ready for that, just for the pure and simple fact that we still don't have the public or the fire department, the call center. So my motion would be that we delay this adoption of the priorities until we have a work session relating to those and see what we really need to work on. Thank you.
Okay, so there is a motion. It would delay this for further discussion at a work session. Is there a second to the motion? Councilmember Ronning makes the second. Okay, discussion on the motion. Is there discussion on the motion? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll support this motion. I also looked through this, and I have had conversations with Chris. I think some of the items need to be a separate category in different policies. As I look through this, again, I said this before, I think this is a pretty good representation of what Chris's interpretation is of the council priorities, but I'm not sure it's the actual council priorities. So I think we need to have a little more discussion on it and kind of fine tune it. We can sure do it tonight if that's what the council wants to do, but I would recommend we do it during a work session or a separate meeting, council priority meeting.
Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. So I seconded this and had spoken with Pam earlier about it also. I will share that I was surprised to see this in a consent agenda. It certainly wasn't my understanding when we talked about the council priorities in a work session that that was the discussion. That was supposed to be our policy discussion. That was supposed to be the discussion we were having for council priorities. I did not have that understanding at that work session. My concern with this is that we've just received in part the CPSM study on police operations and data analysis, and I think there were really significant items in there that show we have work to be done when it comes to the police part. So I'm expecting that we're going to be hearing about fire and 911 as well. One of the conversations that we've had in the past is that we are seeing significant violent crime increase in our city. We're seeing significant crime increase in our city. I think this takes serious consideration and conversation dedicated at the city leadership level on how we are going to be addressing that, and not just saying, Chief St. John, go address the crime. Yellowstone Substance Abuse Connect, go address the crime. Continuum of Care, go address the crime. I think at a city leadership level, we need to be having some serious discussion on how we are going to be dedicating city resources to addressing the crime that we're seeing rise in our city. So that's why I'm supporting this and hope that we can have some real serious discussion on that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate the comments. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I really appreciate the comments that have been made. I'm just looking at number one priority, and under the bullet point number 1, improving Billings public safety, it has the fire department, the PD, and the code enforcement, the limited space needs, public safety mill levy, how that might work, massage therapy license, all of these things. And to me, the first bullet point will be a year's worth of work. We struggled through how many work sessions and sessions trying to come up with the public safety mill levy that we just passed. I can't imagine looking at the kinds of items that are under bullet point, the first bullet point, that we're not going to have at least a year's worth of work in there. So I'm not sure how having more priorities or how that would play out would actually benefit us, because it looks like under bullet point 1, there's a year's worth of work. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Purington. And then, I'm sorry, Councilmember Shaw and then Councilmember Purington.
Thank you. I agree with that, Councilmember Joy. And my interpretation of this is that to get to that next level of discussions, we first have to approve this, to say, yes, these are our priorities, so that we can then have the much deeper policy implication discussions that we need to have on public safety, which we all know. So I'm just saying that's my interpretation of why this comes first, is that we have to first say these are our priorities, and then we can talk about the implementation and going forward.
Okay, Councilor Purington.
Thank you. And I agree that improving the safety of Billings is one of our number one priorities, but also there's other issues, other departments within the city that we need to look at what they are doing. And as I said, and I don't know if I said it in my email to the council or to Chris, but evidently the staff has a list of their priorities too. And I would assume those are by department. And I think it would be wise for us to be able to know, what council would know what those priorities are as well, because it would kind of set the tone on how we prioritize the other bullet points that we have throughout that document. I know that we were trying to come up with a different model for doing priorities. We've got initiatives that I think that the council still needs to be able to put forward for things that come up as we go. I think, Danny, you talked to, how does the council get to be creative in some of the things that maybe they feel like needs to happen in the city that are outside of the priorities. But we need to know where staff's going to. I think that's something that if we know where they're going, it will help direct us as well as us to direct them. And Sean, I think that was what you mentioned at that work session, is that our priorities direct staff. Well, sometimes some of the things are coming out of those departments that we need to know about because we may not be aware of them. So that's why I don't want to spend hours on it. I don't think we need to spend hours on it, but I do think that we need to at least look at it step by step again. We've already got the priorities in front of us. We don't need to come up with 75 more, but yet I still think we need to look at them and either expand them or condense them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can just kind of pose a question for council that might help the discussion, which is, can we be as specific as possible? Councilmember Ronning was specific about what she would like to see happen. Councilmember Purington gave her Friday email at 8:34 p.m. With some specific items. But what else? This has been out there for quite a while, so we've had opportunity to make specific requests to staff. I know I have not done that. So, but I'd hate to just delay it for the sake of delay if there aren't specific issues other than those that have been mentioned by Councilmember Purington in her email and Councilmember Ronning on the public safety issue. But anyway, that's just a thought. Other discussion. What's before us now is this substitute motion for, or I'm sorry, the underlying motion, the only motion for delayed to a work session. Further discussion? Is there any further discussion on that? Councilmember Neese.
Mayor, I guess I wasn't specific enough in what I didn't like about the priorities, and I'll fill that in for you since you've asked. One of the concerns I had with what we do as a city is, again, looking for planning of how we are going to build infrastructure, things like that. And we, in two spots in here, talks about, the need for a policy on how we're going to address, utility infrastructure and things like that. And they're both tied to land, particular land use products, but that's not the issue. The issue is the priority needs to be a city policy on how we, have the extensions for utilities throughout the whole city. It's not just the heights. Both of these projects happen to be the heights, and so they're tied to heights projects. It's not about the heights. We have to worry about what it is about the entire city. So I think that those particular bullet points that deal with utility expansion options need to be pulled out on their separate thing and not tied to a project. We as the council voted in December to move forward with the inner belt loop without regard to the utility expansion, and we still continue to see staff put it, tie that utilities into the road project. And so as a priority, no, I really believe that needs to be pulled and separated out. So that's one of the priorities on there. Some of the other stuff is fairly minor. And I suppose if we start going through some of the priorities, I'd probably say we'd have to live with it because like Denise said, this is a year-long project and we're going to probably address some of that when it comes along the time to actually address the specific issue. But that's really one of my biggest issues on that is how that we're trying to address one project issue instead of the citywide problem.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Brown.
I can tell you I was not going to support this motion, but I will now. There's obviously a lot of discussion going on here, and there's things on here that I may not agree with, but if the majority of the council does, then it's a council priority. I'm not the final say. So, I think we maybe need to go back to the drawing board and figure out, who the majority of the council agrees with each one of these. So I'm going to support it and say, let's do another work session and just get it hammered out and make it very clear this time is the hammer out.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion on the motion. Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing that I'd like to see get moved up into the ongoing critical parts, and that is the Heights water. That's got long-lasting implications for the city of Billings, and the more days and years that go by before something gets settled or worked out there, the harder it's going to be to overcome it, and who knows, we may never even get our money back that they owe us. So that's we're 2 years past the time when it was finally decided, and it's just kind of been lagging. And I don't know, I kind of know where some of the fault lies, but I think it needs a lot more work, because if we're going to talk about the Billings bypass, that sewer line is out there, but there's no city water close to that bypass. So either we got to go through Heights water or we got to go around them. So it's a pretty critical issue.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion. Councilmember Tricky.
My biggest concern with bringing it up in this fashion is about bringing it up in this fashion. I do not believe that we have figured out a good process for how to do this yet. So to me, figuring that out is probably a lot more important. And I was fine with punting the list until next year. given that the amount of time and energy we were going to have to spend on public safety and things that are currently on that list, we're pretty high up there. I do agree that there are a couple of things that I think should be on that list, but I also fully intended to bring those issues up, like the neighborhood plans and stuff like that, without worrying about whether it was on this list or not. So, I will go along with whatever the process is that council wants to do on this, but I also feel that our biggest issue right now is figuring out how to do it. I think we got halfway there last year. I think we got some really good recommendations last year, but I also feel that the tool that we used in order to prioritize things was not the right one to use. It just took too long to drag something from position 71 up to position 22. And, we need a better tool and a better process for doing it. So that's where I'm at on it. Without a good process, I don't believe that we're going to make any significant progress on this.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? And the motion is to bring this back at a work session. If not, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are council members Ronning, Purington, Yakwich, Ewalt, Brown, and Neese. Voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition are council members Chiriki, Boyette, Joy, Shaw, and Cole. By my count, the motion passes 6-5, correct? So unless I got that wrong, we'll be looking for this on a future work session. I would encourage us to have as much input to staff, since it's still in staff's hands. Get staff to add detail, subtract detail, whatever, before we get to the work session as much as possible, and give them specific language, because we're approving a written document. Let's not talk conceptually. It's too late in the game for that. Let's give them exact language, and council can accept or reject that later. That'd be my recommendation. I see a few other hands up. Okay, with that resolves item 1H. We'll move on to the bills. Item 1I, 1 and or 2. Is there a motion relating to the bills of the week of February 1st and February 8th? Councilmember Neese?
Make a motion, we approve the bills, or item 1I and 2, with Councilmember Brown abstaining.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Councilmember Boyette? Motion is for approval, item 1I. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the council, with the exception of Councilmember Brown, who abstain. That concludes that item, and we'll move on. Well, I was going to say we'd move on to item number 2, but it's 7:30. So let's take a quick break. We'll get into our regular agenda, and hopefully those will proceed quickly. We'll see you in about 5 minutes, 7:35. 7 or 8 minutes. We're back now with item number 2, and which is the first item of our regular agenda. This is a public hearing. Anybody who's listening, all of these are public hearings, and we'll have an opportunity for public comment after each one, or not after, but toward the end of each one. And it's the same phone number, 237-6196. Do not call that number quite yet. I'll try to give you some notice as we get close to that public hearing time. Tony, would you read item number 2, and then we'll turn it over to Debbie Melling for our presentation.
Item number 2, public hearing and resolution creating SILMD 330 and amending SILMD 280, South 32nd Street West reconstruction. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Debbie Melling, Head of Public Works, it's all yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. It's the same presentation you guys have seen many times recently, but a different area of town. So, all right, assuming everybody can see that. So this is the new Streetlight District that we will be creating, if approved tonight, on 32nd Street West from King south to Conrad Road, which is just south of Gable. This is a map, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this than I normally do because this is a pretty convoluted district compared to most of them that we do. So starting at the north end, there is one light that's in a District 305 right now. That light, because it is on 32nd and it will be retrofitted with an LED, that light is going to be pulled into District 330 because it benefits the people on 330 more than 305, which is north of there. So that light will be pulled in. 305 does not need to be amended because it won't change it more than 3%. That's why you're not seeing 305 on here. And then 280 will run the entire length of the project down to where you see the lights starting on the south end. Those lights that are in yellow with green are in existing District 280. And because they are going to be retrofitted with LED and be along 32nd Street West, we are proposing that they get moved into District 330 as well and taken out of 280. So we would take those 10 lights out, put them in 330, and then several of the properties would change from being in 280. They would change to 330 there on the west side because they would benefit from these lights. And then on the east side, those 2 parcels that are in the kind of aqua blue color there will be in both districts 280 and 330 because they benefit from the 280 lights going east and west and the 330 lights going north and south. So I know that was a lot, but the bottom line is this district will basically encompass everything on the north-south section here of 32nd. It'll clean it up and have LED lights for this whole section. It also puts the property owners in the right districts. So I kind of talked through most of this, but here are the details of it. There's 44 properties, 5 of which are in the county. We do include county properties in our SLIMDs throughout the city. There's 37 total luminaires that are going to be in this district. 26 are new, and then, like I said, the 10 that moved from 280 and the one that moved from 305. It is city-owned and maintained. It's about $7,500 annually. You can see the cost per lineal foot. There are no city properties within this district, and we have not received any protests. So the next steps here, we can answer any questions. And then after holding a public hearing, we recommend that you approve the creation of that SLIMD 330 and amend 280.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. Do we have questions for Debbie? Councilmember Nice.
Debbie, can you remind me how you notify the property owners of the district? Is it just a public hearing or is it actually individual notices to each property owner?
Sure. It's actually individual notices that are mailed after the intent. The resolution of intent was on the meeting last month. And then once it's approved, we send out mailers to everyone on the property or in the district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Debbie? Councilmember Ewell?
Thank you, Mayor. Debbie, can you give me an approximate light coverage area that these lights cover when you put them up? Because I think they got to be directed pretty much straight down, don't they? To keep from having light interference on everybody. Or how do they work?
I can't give you an exact because it depends on the height of the light that we put in. And I don't know off the top of my head what the height of these are. LED does have a different light spread than the high pressure sodiums. So you do have to put those in at a different spacing and at different heights than we do with the old districts. I can send you that. I don't have it off the top of my head though.
The reason I'm asking is I see most of those lights are on the west side of 32nd. And so if you have directional lighting, the people on the west side benefit way more from the light on their property than the people on the east side of the streets do. And
so that's, oh, sorry.
So I know it'd be way more costly to alter them, one on one side, one on the other, but can you share any light on that?
Certainly. Our initial designs always start with the lights on each side, alternating sides. You'll see that on Grand, several other streets that we design. This particular one, the lights on the south end are already existing. That's why those are mostly on the west side. I would need to pull the plans to see exactly where these lights go, but the only reason that we don't alternate is if there's a power line in the way, or say there's some kind of fiber gas line on the one side where we can't dig poles in. But most of the time, the only time we don't alternate is if there's a power line running where we need to be.
Okay. And then one follow-up question, Mayor, please.
Go ahead.
So it looked like it was 0.89 cents a square foot is what the charge is going to be.
I think it's a lineal foot. I'm trying to pull that up here.
Okay, per lineal foot, but 0.89 cents.
Yes.
So that means those two lots on the corner are going to be paying 1.78 cents per lineal foot, or 2 times the 0.89 on both sides of their lots.
So each district has a different amount. So District 280 is actually different than District 330. So District 280, I don't know the numbers, but they will pay their lineal footage on Gable, and then they'll pay their lineal times whatever 280 is sitting at right now. Plus they'll pay their lineal footage on 32nd times this 0.8. So they do pay corner lot. If they're benefiting from 2 districts, they pay 2 districts.
Okay. Thank you,
Debbie. That's very illuminating. Other Councilmember Ewald started it. Other questions for Debbie? Okay, we'll proceed to public hearing. If council has other questions later or during our discussion period, you can pose them. If you're listening and you'd like to be heard on this and you're a member of the public, please call that number immediately, 237-6196. 237-6196. This is the public hearing on item number 2, the Streetlight District on 32nd Street. 237-6196. A reminder to please keep your comments to less than 3 minutes. Tell us your name and address up front, and please turn off or mute your TV screen or your computer screen, because our meeting is actually ahead of what you're hearing, and it gets very confusing if you are trying to listen to both things. 237-6196, the number to call for public comment. Tony, do we have anyone who has called 237-6196 on this item?
I have not received any calls.
Okay, if somebody calls the next few seconds, please let us know. Thank you very much. Moving on, Councilmember Neese.
I'll make a motion, Mayor, having conducted a public hearing, consider written and spoken public testimony. I move to approve resolution creating SILMD 330 and amending SILMD 280 as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Councilmember Purington, I see. Discussion on the motion. Motion is for approval. Councilmember Boyette?
Just as a note, the city changed our lights from front of our house from the typical to the new LEDs, and I can't believe how incredible they are. So I'm very impressed with these new lighting systems. They're directional. They can actually move them around to run the light lengthways versus sideways. So this is a good deal. I encourage it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other discussion on the motion? Is there any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 3. Tony, would you read item number 3?
Item number 3, public hearing and resolution authorizing filing and acceptance of the annual Federal Transit Administration grant applications. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Chris Kukulski, I believe Kevin Plone is our presenter tonight. I'll just turn it over to him if you don't have any introductory words.
And
I see Rusty Logan is with us. Okay, Rusty, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Mayor Cole. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to provide information on this item. I don't have a presentation this evening, just some simple background information. As required by federal regulations, the Aviation and Transit Department is reviewing in an annual public hearing Met Transit Division's program of projects it intends to execute using USC 49, Section 5307 funding. Our program is very simple year in and year out. Met consistently uses the available funding to carry out transit operations. Funding amount at approximately $1.9 million constitutes a little over 30% of Met's annual operating budget. This grant program does require a 50% match, meaning Met Transit will use $1.9 million of local funds to match this grant. City Billings staff recommends City Council approves the proposed program of projects, the acceptance of the grant award, and provide the mayor authorization to execute this grant, as well as the required Federal Transit Administration annual certifications and assurances. Further, the Aviation and Transit Department is also asking the council to approve the application for acceptance of and execution of the various grant programs that are available throughout the federal operating year. These grants do include, but are not limited to, Section 5310 funding, which focuses on capital investments in support of seniors and individuals with disabilities, as well as Section 5339 funding focused on bus facility and technology projects. And those grants all come available throughout the year as far as application goes, as well as some of the formulary funding that the feds put out for them. So there are times throughout the year that we're notified of this funding after council does pass a resolution. That's kind of why we pass these in advance so that we have a resolution ready to go. Traditionally, we use our 5310 funding to replace small buses within our paratransit fleet, while the 5339 funding has recently been utilized to purchase replacement buses and upgraded technologies. That's pretty much the gist of it. As far as 5307, while that program is eligible for capital expenses, once again, we do primarily use that to focus just on operations. And pretty straightforward. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and recommend, after holding a public hearing, the council approve the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Rusty? Councilmember Purington.
Just a quick question. Does the city have to show that it has those matching funds in order to apply for matching fund grant?
Yeah, typically when we submit a grant application, they do ask for financial records. Usually, we provide our budget our budget layout to them. And then as well as that, we do provide copies of the resolutions that authorize us to accept those public mill levies that are authorized for transit.
Okay. Any other questions for Rusty? Councilmember Neese?
Rusty, this earlier, during COVID, the city waived a lot of the fees for passengers on the buses and things like that. Does any of that waiver of income count towards matching grant because we're foregoing that income?
As far as matching goes, FTA does have stipulations in place as far as fare box recovery goes, and since we waived fare box funds, there's not really any qualification for matching grant or matching funds on those, because typically a transit agency is not allowed to utilize money that we take in through the fare box as matching funds. We can put those back into operational expenses; they just don't qualify for the match.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Rusty? We'll open up public comment, even if there are questions. Anybody listening who wants to comment should call that number now, 237-6196. This is the public hearing on item number 3, 237-6196. Any other questions for Rusty while we wait for callers? To our callers, just remind you to please keep your comments to less than 3 minutes. Tell us your name and address up front. Please mute or turn off your screen, your computer, or your television, because our meeting is actually ahead of what you're hearing, and it's confusing if you don't. That number again, 237-6196. Any other questions for Rusty? Or Tony, do we have anyone who has called 237-6196?
We have not received any calls.
Okay, if we get any calls in the next few seconds, please let us know. We'll close our public comment. Councilmember Ronning and Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. I was going to make a motion.
Please do.
I move to approve and adopt a resolution authorizing filing and acceptance of the annual Federal Transit Administration grant applications as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette with the second. Motion is for approval. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion is for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation in the packet.
Did I miss public comment?
Well, yes and no. We did open it, but we didn't have any public comment. So we've had our hearing. Yes.
Okay.
All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Tony, would you please read item number 4?
Item number 4, public hearing and resolution approving and adopting budget amendments for Poly Vista Park improvements. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval, or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Andy Zeller. Andy, are you our presenter on this?
Sure. Mayor and Council, good evening. There is no formal presentation for this. It is tied to item 1B, which you already approved. This request is to increase the FY21 budget. It will also result in a decrease of the FY22 budget for this project when that's brought to you later in the year. Beyond that, I have no presentation and I'm available to answer questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any questions for Andy? Members of the public, be prepared to call that number 237-6196. This is a public hearing item. In fact, go ahead and feel free to open it. We'll open our public comment period right now, our public hearing on Poly Vista Park Improvement Budget Amendment, item number 4. That number again, 237-6196. Any questions for Andy or Mike Whitaker or any other staff if we've still got them on the screen? Don't see any. So for the public, that number again, 237-6196. This is a public hearing on the Poly Vista Park Improvement contract with Land Design Inc. for that budget amendment. That number 237-6196. Please keep your comments to less than 3 minutes if you call in. Tony, do we have anyone who is called in on this item?
I have not received any calls.
Okay, we will close the public hearing then on item number 4. Councilmember Ronning and Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. I was going to go ahead and make the motion.
Please do.
So having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve and adopt the budget amendments as recommended by city staff.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese. We have a motion and it's been seconded. Discussion on the motion.
I did.
Yes.
Call.
I'm sorry. Okay. Council, with your permission, I'm going to, given the roughness of seeing who's out there in phone land, allow the caller to be heard. So, Tony, please put the caller on.
Thank you for your call. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
Deanne Visser, 4223 Rangeview Drive, Billings, 59106.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just calling to thank the council for their past support, and I'm calling on behalf of Landon's Legacy Foundation. We're looking forward to getting shovels in the ground. Hopefully we can still have time for a late summer, early fall league for the kids. And I think once we are able to see kids playing at the park, we'll all be so happy that we have continued moving this project forward. And I just appreciate everything that the council has done. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for your call.
Thank you. Tony, any other callers?
I do. Hello, and thank you for your call. You have reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes in which to give your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
Yes, it's Julie Thomason, 265 Caravan Avenue in Billings.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, this is Julie Thomason. I'm a member of the Landon's Legacy Foundation board. And first of all, I want to thank you for accepting the consulting agreement with Land Design for continuing the design development, and would ask you to approve the budget amendment so that we can move forward with the development of this park. Just as a reminder of who that park will serve, not only does it serve families with special needs, with children, citizens, and veterans, but all of the city and outlying areas. Our foundation has already paid for the 30% development of $43,000, and we are prepared to write a check for another $49,000 for our portion of the continuation of that. And you know, we are hoping, or our goal is at least to have a grand opening and a limited season this fall. So thank you in advance for partnering with Land Design and Landon's Legacy Foundation for this much needed park for our city. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you. Tony, any other callers?
I do not have any other callers.
Okay, thank you. Again, we'll close the public comment period on item number 4. We do have a motion before us and a second for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation and the proposed motion on your agenda. Any discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? Don't see any, except I'll just express the community's continued appreciation to Landon's Legacy and its donors and its board members and everybody who's worked so hard to drive this project forward. Thank you very much. The community is better for it. Okay, we'll proceed to a vote then. The motion is for approval. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Tony, would you read item number 5?
Item number 5, public hearing and first reading ordinance granting a non-exclusive franchise to Montana Dakota Utilities for the operation of a gas distribution system. Staff recommends approval. Action, approval, or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Our presenter tonight, I think, is our city attorney, Gina Dahl. Gina.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, I don't have a presentation either, but just a bit of background information for Council. This is a renewal of a franchise, which was previously granted for, it was granted in 2005 for 15 years. Well, actually, it's been in existence since 1979, but was most recently renewed in 2005. It expired in May of 2020. I learned that this franchise had expired in January when I was contacted by the recently appointed regional director of MDU, Brandon Lance, who's here tonight as well, if you have any questions. When he reached out to me to follow up on an email he had sent to the previous city attorney, Mr. Brooks, trying to reach out to finalize this agreement. Brent had begun working on this with the previous regional director. However, when it was not completed prior to his retirement, the new regional director, Mr. Lance, contacted me to follow up. So then Deputy City Attorney Stacy Tenney took the lead on this and followed it up to completion. While I said it's a renewal, it is actually being presented as an ordinance to repeal the previous ordinance and replace it with a new one. We did it that way because the previous franchise had expired, and we just felt it was more appropriate to repeal the expired ordinance and enact a new ordinance. However, there have not been any substantive changes to the franchise. It's a non-exclusive franchise to MDU to operate a gas distribution system for 15 years. It addresses all the same regulatory issues as the original franchise, including relocation, system development, and other key operational areas. Montana law allows public utilities the right to use public right-of-ways for utility lines and facilities. The city has regulatory authority over its streets, but it does not have the power to exclude public utilities. So the purpose of this franchise is to provide the city the ability to set terms and conditions for MDU to use the public right-of-way. And as I said, Stacy is here with us today. I think she's here. She's there. She's just not on. And she did most of the work on this, so she can field any questions if you have any questions about the ordinance itself.
Great, thank you. We'll have an opportunity for any questions for Gina or for Stacy or for Brandon. And also we'll ask Brandon if he wants to comment further. He's more than welcome to do so. Just at any point, turn on your screen and we'll turn it over to you. Councilmember Boyette, you raised your hand.
Thank you, Mayor. Since this expired in May of last year, is there any ramifications for us not doing anything since that time?
No, I'm muted. Sorry. Actually, not really. As I said, the Montana law allows public utilities the right to use the public rights of way. So there haven't been, we don't collect any franchise fees in this case, so there hasn't been any impact in that respect.
Mayor, can I have a follow-up?
Please.
Are there any other issues that you're not aware of that may have expired since last year that you're going to have to go find like this?
Well, I guess if I'm not aware of them, I'm not sure how I can be aware of them. So, things pop up, and I think we're pretty close to getting things covered. But I guess I can't guarantee that something's not going to creep up on me.
Gina, it does kind of beg the question whether we've got a good calendaring system that tracks contracts and gives us a year or two notice of expiration dates.
Yes, and I think that Brent actually did kind of work with Denise Bowman on some of those things. So that's something that I think that I can discuss with Denise and Tony and see if we can figure out a little bit better system.
Thank you. Other questions for Gina, Stacy, and Brandon? You've turned on your screen, so we'll turn it over to you. Just welcome to the meeting. If you'd like
Thanks
to
for having me.
Please do.
Thanks for having me here today. I just want to appreciate or give my appreciation to Gina and team that jumped on this when I found out about it and reached out to her. Her willingness to jump on this and move this through the system is appreciated. So thank you. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese, did you have your hand up?
I did. I was going to point out Brandon was there, but I did have a question and comment. So I guess along the same lines, I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, Brandon, was there anything in this year time that it wasn't renewed that you had any issues with as far as the providing services to the city residents?
No, this is the only thing that I'm aware of.
Okay. And Mayor, if you don't mind, I have another.
Please.
So Gina and I emailed today on about some of this stuff, and I thought it was interesting that it dealt with a lot of these franchise fees that the city did not pass, but also lost some lawsuits in the past. And it was clear that, at least it was clear to me that, I think sometimes we're afraid to attack or look at the franchising fee option. But the courts didn't necessarily say we can't do it. What it said is you have to have a pretty good tie to what you're providing, and it can't be based on gross revenue. It has to really be more of a unit type based. And they gave some good examples in that. And even though we're providing this right of way, the use of the right of way, I mean, there is some maintenance for the city to maintain this. Now, in the MDU case, it may not be as much as some of the other utilities. But, if there's, for instance, in our, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're addressing the utility at this time, but there's other utilities that use our right of ways. And if there's an accident with a telephone pole and electrical, then it goes down. Now we're suddenly using city services, emergency service for that. Whereas if that was underground, you wouldn't have those kind of issues. We're plowing streets, maintaining streets for these utility companies to, get to their service and product. So I think there's the ways, again, when we look at ways to offset some of the costs that we're providing for these, we should consider that in looking at policy for adding some type of, in fact, the court said you can add a per dollar per line or foot or something like that in a line. So I would hope that when we look at these agreements like that, we can build some of that cost of maintaining these right-of-ways and pass that back on to the utilities are actually benefiting from that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions for staff before we open up for public hearing? I don't see any. If you have questions later, we'll come back to council. But for the public, please call that number. If you'd like to comment on item number 5, this is the public hearing. The phone number again, 237-6196, 237-6196 for item number 5, the franchise agreement or ordinance with MDU. 237-6196. Please keep your comments to less than 3 minutes. Tell us your name and address, and please turn off your television screen or your computer. Because our meeting is ahead of what you're hearing, and it'll be very confusing if you don't. 237-6196. While we're waiting for any calls, council, any other questions for Brandon, Gina, Stacy, or any other staff member? Tony, do we have anyone who's called 237-6196?
We have not received any calls.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing then on item number 5 and ask whether there is a motion or other discussion. Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I'm going to make motion. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve first reading ordinance granting a non-exclusive franchise to Montana Dakota Utilities as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette would like to second the motion. Motion is for approval. Discussion now on the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion before we move to a vote? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and enjoy your natural gas. That concludes item number 5 and brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. So if you're listening tonight and there's an item you'd like to discuss or comment on that wasn't on our agenda, this is the time to call that number, 237-6196, 237-6196 for any items not on our agenda tonight. Please call that number. Keep your comments to less than 3 minutes. Tell us your name and address. Turn off or mute your screen. Tony, do we have anyone who's called 237-6196?
I have not received any phone calls.
Okay, I'm not sure I gave a full kind of minute, so we'll pause briefly. If anybody wants to call that number, we want to make sure that we give you an opportunity and we want to hear from you. So 237-6196 for anything that was not on our agenda this evening. After that, we will ask if there are any council initiatives, and then we will be adjourning for the night. 237-6196. Tony, do we have anyone who has called that number before I close our public comment on non-agenda items?
No one has called.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll close public comment on non-agenda items, move to council initiatives before we adjourn. Any council initiatives before we adjourn this evening? Councilmember Ronnie?
Thank you. Not an initiative, but there are a number of you that reached out to me, and there's been a number of the public that's reached out to me. My heart goes out to the couple that lost their lives in Rygate, and I've been asked if he was a relative of mine because we have an unusual last name that is similar. And no, we were not related, but wanted to let you all know that no, we're not related. And thank you to everyone who did reach out to me. And my heart goes out to that other Ronning family and their loss. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that.
Thank you very much. Our Golden Valley neighbors. The Coles come partly from Rygate. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and take the rest of the day off, and we are adjourned. I'm sorry, Councilmember. Oh, you're just waving, Councilmember Tricky. You were trying to say something, right? No, just waving. Okay.
Good job zipping us along tonight, Bill.
Okay.